Hi, I'm Margaret Lewin, and I'm the owner of Miss Marker's Quilts, a long-arm quilting service in New York. And what I'm going to show you today is how to bind a quilt. What I've done is I've gotten a yard of a beautiful batik fabric. The quilt that I'm going to bind this with is all different batiks. So start with a yard of fabric, and I want you to press it really well. Make sure that it's all the creases are out of it. Then once you've got it good and pressed, I want you to lay it down on your cutting board. Alright, so now that I've got my material all pressed, I'm going to match up my selvage ends together. And sometimes you gotta mess with the fabric a little bit just to get it even. I'm doing that, lining up my selvage as best I can, and making certain that my piece of fabric is really nice and smooth. So once I've done that, what I see is that my edges just don't match up. So I need to get a straight edge to cut from for my 2.5 inch strips. So I'm going to fold it over in quarters. And then I'm going to use my cutting mat as a ruler to line it up. I'll line it up from this end for you. And I'm lining it right up on this yellow line right here. You can see I'm just not even here, so I need to scooch it up a little bit, straighten it out. Okay, so now what the next step is, I need to get this line to be a straight line to start my 2.5 inch strips. I'm going to take my Creative Grids ruler. This time I'm using my 18.5 inch one, and I'm going to line it up over here. I'm using the lines on my cutting mat to get a straight line. And I'm just going to cut it off, and now I've got a really nice straight line to start my 2.5 inch strips. Now if I was making a quilt that had scallops on the side of it or had rounded corners, I would have to absolutely cut my fabric on the bias. But because the quilt that I'm binding is just a straight quilt, I don't need to cut bias strips. I can just cut straight ones. So I'm going to need a total of 8 of these. I'll get these cut, and the next stage we're going to do is connect all the pieces. So I'll be back in just a minute. Alright, I've got all 8 of my strips cut, so I'm now ready to put them together. You can see they're all cut. With a batik fabric, there is no right side or wrong side. You can see, I'll lay it out for you. Which is the right, which is the wrong. You really can't tell. There's no difference to it. But if I was to take just a normal cotton fabric that's not a batik, you can see that there definitely is a right side and a wrong side. So to put all of these strips together, I'm going to show you how to do it first on this piece so you can easily see the right side and the wrong side and the definition between the two. So I take my first strip and I lay it down face up. I take my next strip that I want to connect it to and I lay it face down in a straight angle. Once I do that, I take my Creative Grids ruler, and I need to draw a diagonal line from this corner to this corner. So I'm going to take my Creative Grids, I'm going to line it up, and just take a plain pencil, and I'm just going to draw a line from one end to the other. Now you can see that is my sewing line. So I'm just going to leave it right there in place, and I'm going to pin it together. And I'm going to keep going in that manner until I have all 8 of my strips sewn together. So if I was to continue on this one, I would flip this over, lay another piece of fabric, and draw a line. So I'll do some of them with my batik for you. So here's my right side up. This is my selvage, and I don't want my selvage to be any part of this. So when I lay my next strip, I'm going to lay it so that the selvage is beyond both edges. I'm going to again take my Creative Grids ruler. Let me straighten that just a little bit. Take my Creative Grids ruler and I'm going to draw a line diagonally. And I don't think you're going to be able to see this on the camera, but I've drawn a line from one corner to the other. Now I'm going to pin it together. And I will continue. I'm going to flip my material. And add my next piece. Again, making certain that my selvage extends so that it does not become part of my binding strip. Draw a line, being careful not to move it, pin it together. Well, that line is my sewing line. And then I'll continue and do the next one. So I'll be back once I get all 8 of these done, and we'll go over the sewing machine and I'll show you how we sew them together. Alright, so I am over at my sewing machine, and I'm going to grab my very first piece. You have to put this in front of you for a second. And I'm not certain if you can see it or not, but I have a sewing line that goes right down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just with a regular foot, there isn't a walking foot on, I'm just going to sew from one corner to the next. And I'm going to do that so that it takes all 8 of my strips and makes it into one. So I'm just going to start sewing. And just keep right on going. And I will do what's called chain piecing. I will sew one, then I'll grab my next one. See, I've got my next one. And I'll just keep right on going and sew all 8 of them together. You need to make sure that's flat. And here we go on the next. So once I get all 8 of these together, I will be back to show you how I trim them and then how I press them. Be right back. Alright, so I've gotten all of my pieces sewn together, and I think you can see they're all sewn. What I'm going to do is just clip them apart first. And then once I've clipped them apart, I'm going to trim them up. Now you can either go back to the cutting board and mark exactly 1/4 of an inch, or you can just guesstimate it. And I just guess it and go right straight across and just clip it. Go on to my next. And I'll do that on all of them. Then once I've done that, I will be back and we will press it. I've gotten all my pieces trimmed, so the first thing I want to do before I do anything else is I want to press these seams down. Doesn't matter if I press it to the left or to the right, but I need to press these down. So I'm going to first press all 8 of these down. Get them nice and flat. Almost done. It's important that you do this first, because if you don't, what ends up happening when you're pressing your bias or your binding strips in half to get ready to put them on is it's a mess to work with. So I always go through and I always press it first. The other thing it does is kind of untangles it a little bit. Alright, so those are all done. So now I'm going to just pull this all back and start at the very beginning. And what I'm going to do is just take my fabric and I'm going to fold it in half and I'm going to press this down. And I'm going to do this on the entire length of the fabric. Once I've done that, then my binding is ready to be attached to my fabric. So I'm going to just do a couple more, just a little bit further down for you. If you have a problem getting it to lie flat, don't hesitate to take some type of pressing stuff. I like the Best Press the best, and squirt it on it and then go over and iron it again, because you want this piece really pretty flat. So once I get this all ironed, I'll come back and we'll get this attached to the quilt and I'll show you how I sew it. We'll be back in just a minute.